Welcome to the Great Distraction.
What's up, people? This is The Great Distraction, and today the topic of discussion is emotions. My name is Ben. With me today are my co-hosts Thomas.
How's it going?
Rick.
Hey, everybody.
And Glenn.
Hello.
If this is your first time listening, welcome. We thank you for joining us. The Great Distraction is a podcast that focuses on a vast and random range of topics, and we hope that each episode leaves you with, if nothing else, something to ponder. A little something to think on. Today, emotions. This is kind of a...
How's that make you feel?
How does yeah, exactly. Kind of a weird angle that brought me to mention this topic to the guys, and then kind of go off of and see where we where the conversation takes us. But let me start off by a simple definition, and I think this is Merriam-Webster. It doesn't really matter, but anyway, you get the idea. A natural, instinctive state of mind deriving from one's circumstances, mood, or relationships with others. A conscious mental reaction, such as anger or fear, subjectively experienced as strong feeling usually directed toward a specific object or person, I suppose. The person could be the object. And typically accompanied by a physiological and behavioral change in the body. Okay, ponder on that. I'll start off from there. For the sake of this discussion, I wanted to say that we're going to use emotions and feelings as kind of interchangeably. So they're going to be the same thing for lack of a better reason to differentiate the two, just in case that becomes a point going forward. What I wanted to think about and talk about and ponder here is how real are emotions? And an example to get you questioning that is this. Imagine the worst day that you've had. Just everything went bad. You know, if you got kids, you had a pain in the ass trying to get them ready in the morning, and you're stressed, and you're getting to be late to work. Whatever. Your girlfriend broke up with you,
and on top of that, your dog died.
You're exactly. We have a sick parent. You just found out you were losing the game.
Damn it!
Anything you can imagine that made you feel terrible. There is a concept. Well, you've got that feeling of the last time you felt like that in your head, which I'm sorry for doing that to you, but you had to. It puts you in the place. There is a concept that I was reading about a while ago that I found to be very true. If under those circumstances you do something as simple as forcing some of the small muscles in your cheek, one side or the other or both, to curl up just ever so slightly, to begin forming a smile. If you can eke out that smile, your emotions of miserableness or depression or unhappiness or sadness, whatever, will begin to change as a result of just that physiological or behavioral change in the body that we mentioned in the definition.
It reminds me of little kids, and they were being all bratty and mean or mad or something. You make them laugh, and all of a sudden they smirk like they're smiling. You're like, I gotcha.
That's right. They were screaming, crying, throwing a tantrum. You tickled them for a second or made a funny face or something, and all of a sudden...
It all changed.
Just a 180 right in their attitude.
That's right. That is actually something that is built in to humans. That has nothing to do with children.
Emotional manipulation.
That's right. Yeah. Well, yeah. When somebody else is causing it, but this is you. And my point is that you are the one forcing this emotion. You're manipulating yourself. You're correct. Yeah. So, so it's there from day one, and it doesn't go away as we get older. I think what happens to us is that as we get older, we begin to we kind of solidify in our own minds that these emotions that we have are part of us, and that that we are one and one with them. So you have an emotion based on your reaction to something, and that is just the way you feel about it. Every time, I don't know if you're a hardcore liberal, every time Trump comes on the screen, you're angry. Or every time somebody cuts you off, it's like on the road, it's the worst thing that has ever happened to you, and you are just pissed about it. In that sense, we kind of like to take a back seat when it comes to how our emotions affect us. We oftentimes live life as though the emotions we feel are kind of forced on us. Like I mentioned, if somebody cuts you off, you have to feel bad about that. Like Go ahead.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I'm an oddball. I tend to consider things that happen to me in a third person. I'll reflect on an initial feeling and then consider, all right, it's not really bad. Nah. Oh, this is a good song.
Maybe if you have, that's how fleeting they can be, right?
Totally.
And if you have enough time to think about the situation, you take almost like that time gives you a chance to step back and think about what really went on, and then you can adjust, get a little better control of that fleeting emotion that initially hits you right off the bat. But what I'm kind of going off of with these is those initial emotions that come from, well, that's where we're going to go here. Where do they come from? Why do they happen that way? Why is it a simple action or a simple situation that really has no relevance in your life at all, like being cut off, can affect you?
Well, I think that touches on a little bit of the necessity of emotions, or what the function they provide. When somebody cuts you off, they are presenting a danger to you. So you have it's a trigger of the fight or flight response. You have a reaction, and typically when somebody, or if you were, imagine yourself in the woods, something comes and threatens you. You have an option to fight it or run away from it. And if you're going to fight, typically you have an emotional anger response that fuels that necessity to combat. So when somebody presents a danger to you, like cutting you off in traffic, it hits that anger button in your brain.
With something that is survival, something in a survival situation, I'll totally buy that. I 100% agree with that. But what if it's something like, let's say you're very susceptible to hearing cuss words, and somebody near you says "fuck," and you're just like, oh, that jars something in your brain. Some people are very susceptible to this.
It's a pet peeve.
Well, okay, so we actually started off this topic talking amongst ourselves about pet peeves. So again, a pet peeve, what we were discussing is a pet peeve is not the emotional reaction. It is a situational trigger, an event that causes the person, whoever's experiencing the pet peeve, to have an emotional reaction based on something that they have seen before, a normal trigger.
Something that they've identified as a trigger for an emotion.
Yeah. And so the pet peeve itself is not the actual emotion.
Right.
And
but in that example, cussing would be
their pet peeve,
their trigger.
Would be their trigger, right? But it's not that. But in that case, it's not a survival thing. They're not at risk of getting hurt or dying or injured by somebody saying a cuss word. And
you
there are
could
many.
Probably go back far enough and connected to that, right? It would be something that would be offensive. They would take offense to that and feel like they were being personally attacked. Now, that might be a bit of a stretch, but I think there's a small connection there. Because what's going on here is you're having a learned response to something that they dislike.
True. Okay. Yeah. I mean, and we
once upon a time in our history, somebody says something to offend you, you call them out and you cause a duel or...
Sometimes words feel like a personal attack,
yeah.
And kind of like being cut off in traffic. I feel like when I overreact to that, it's more so that I let someone get in front of me than the threat to my physical condition, right? So I think there's a breakdown there in the fight or flight response, but I think that is the, in fact, trigger to the disdain to being cut off.
My only problem with that is if we go down that route, I'm sitting here racking my brain trying to think if I can figure out any emotional response that couldn't be related to a fight or flight related survival situation.
What about that girl that locks eyes with you across the room? I mean,
is that not a survivalist thing?
It is a survival.
It's reproduction.
Sure, but that's not necessarily fight or flight.
No, true, but I mean, so some primitive tie to it. That's what emotions are for, period, as a mechanism by which to interact with other humans and exist here.
Those are primitive instinctive responses. It's
Yes.
a chemical exchange that happens autonomously. You don't even think about it. You're
That's right.
responding to your environment.
They are, they are unconscious reactions. And then that's regardless of the survival situation, the reproductive situation, or whatever. My point was that, yes, they occur no matter what based on certain triggers. Now, so says science, they're actually constructed by pulling from past experiences of how those situations made us feel and then applied to a predicted current situation and then preemptively used. So, for example, if you have seen, let's say, so I'm just pulling this off the top of my head here. I thought I had some examples written down, but if you had seen someone hit an animal many times in your youth, and that made you feel angry or sad or whatever emotion it invoked, and you happen to be 10, 15, 20, 30 years later sitting in a dog park, and you're watching some person play with their dog, and it looks like they're angrily yelling at the dog, and it looks like they're going to strike the dog. Even before that happens, the person has not raised their hand to the animal. The person just seems to be angrily speaking or yelling to it. If you had a strong emotion from a past experience with animal injury, you may begin to preemptively apply the emotion that previously invoked in the situation that you are predicting that is going to happen. Hasn't happened, may not happen, doesn't matter. You still are having an emotional reaction based on past experiences.
I can see that.
Okay. My problem with that is that means you have less control, or you have lost control to a certain degree, and almost to the sense of being prejudiced. You are actually being prejudiced, prejudging to the situation that's right before you. You're not even giving it a chance to unfold before you prejudge and apply an emotion.
I disagree. I think that's a learned response to an action.
So it's prejudiceness.
Okay, but would you be prejudiced to somebody punching you in the face? Should you wait till that act is...
Some people have to stick their finger in the fire to know that it burns.
Yeah,
but
you
yes,
do
you're
that
right.
once, and now you've learned what happens with that action. So when you see someone come at you with certain body language or raise their hand in a threatening way, you get a spike of adrenaline, and your body starts to automatically prepare itself for that strike. And
so now you're going back to the fight or flight thing. We're not talking about this
But
happening
it
to
ties into the same system.
You're absolutely
it's what
right.
creates the emotion.
But-
It's up to you as the individual to realize that this is not a legitimate threat and to control your emotions and calm down.
But what you're talking about is a threat that's pointed directly at the perceiver. What I'm talking about is a situation that is happening off in the distance.
Okay, so
One invokes an emotional reaction as well as a protective response, dodge that punch that's coming at you. One is none of your business, yet it invokes an emotional reaction based on your previous experiences.
right, I think you would still get a chemical spike to prepare you to whatever you're about to witness. In this example, a dog being beaten, right? And you already have a negative connotation to that behavior, right? So before you even really realize what your body's going through, you're getting that chemical dump, whether it be dopamine or adrenaline. In this situation, it'd be adrenaline and things like that to prepare you to either defend the animal or rescue it or fight off the attacker.
Or just to relate to what happened in your life. Now think about looking at a young couple cuddled off in the distance and making out. There's all kinds of emotions that will probably be that may be triggered within your mind, based on your past experiences. You may feel good, you may feel happy, you may feel sad for the love that you lost. There's all kinds of emotions that can happen just by witnessing a situation.
I mentioned jealousy is another one of those things. Like,
Sure.
people get pissed off about the public display of affection. Oh man, I'm sorry you're jealous, but
As long as they're not like taking clothes off or sticking hands under clothes, I don't know.
sure. I mean, that's
That's their business.
right.
Another interesting thing to consider along those lines is that an emotional response is completely, or actually, no, let me take that back. Another aspect to consider about experiences that people have, which give them varied emotional responses to things, is take a look at or consider. Some people look at small dogs and want to cuddle them. Some people want to kick them.
Yes.
There you go. That was for you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Some people feel bad when they're in trouble and are being yelled at. Some people laugh when they're being yelled at. It's weird. I've seen it. Some people are extremely afraid of snakes and run from
They're
them.
so cuddly though.
There you go. Some people like to pet them and hold them. Those feelings that are invoked when you see these figures, it doesn't matter what it is. Snake, fish, cat, dog, whatever, knife, gun. Those feelings come from, those preemptive prejudice emotions come from past experiences in one's life. They may not have been major experiences. You may be afraid of a knife, not because anyone ever pointed one at you or you were ever cut by one, but because you heard someone say when you were 7 years old, "Don't touch that sharp knife, you'll cut yourself." And that's it. That's all there is. That's your only frame of reference for that object. And now they have forever marked your existence with an experience and thus a preemptive emotional response when you see this object.
Yeah, there's with the knife example. There's
Okay.
a danger recognition. Stop
going back to the danger. That's not what I'm talking about. We're talking in general
Okay.
emotional responses. Yes, I understand there's lots of fight or flight, survivalistic stuff. It could be that drywall over there. I mean, if whatever the situation
Sure.
is,
you had mentioned that, and I was thinking about an experience that happened last Thanksgiving.
That's the thing.
And a family member was carrying the knife they carved the turkey with out to their car, but they got caught in a conversation and they're standing there holding this knife, and I noticed myself taking a defensive reaction to them just holding this thing.
Yep.
And
was that an anxiety or a fear that triggered an anxiety or something?
There was a perceived threat to a certain degree, even though you trusted that person wholly not to intentionally harm you.
Right.
But there is still a dangerous tool in the environment that's being neglected or not handled properly. And that was probably where I believe that started from.
I accept that.
So, going back to what I was saying, the point there is I mentioned knife, and that is the emotional memory, the experience that you brought up in your mind, and then from that, you had an emotion that was assigned to it.
Sure.
That's kind of what I'm going off. It doesn't necessarily have to be a survivalist or I'm going to die or somebody's going to attack. Like I was going to say, the freaking drywall on the wall over there. Looking at a piece of white painted drywall or a piece of a wall, just a blank wall, could invoke an emotional response. You might think, damn, I remember seeing a guy's head bash through a wall before. You could also remember, wow, I remember my mom hanging my first Valentine's that somebody had ever given me on the wall and remembering how that looked with the clean wall and the beautiful red heart that was hanging on there. No, that's not my memory.
When I see the textured drywall, I always think of a mushroom trip that I experienced when I was a teenager.
Because it breathes.
Oh my goodness. Staring at that drywall, just
the breathing.
Watching it move.
That and carpet.
You got to try these carpets, man.
Yeah. Have you seen this carpet, man? That reminds me of that Half-Baked movie. He's like, have you ever done this on weed? Have you ever looked at carpet on shrooms?
Or like the fuzzy wall from Get Him to the Greek.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
That was awesome.
Exactly. So my whole point on this was, for this section here, was that what I want to try to establish is our emotions are not in control of us, but rather are results of how we allow ourselves to react based on relations to past situations. So if we can identify the source of where these emotional reactions come from, I believe that we can start building, for lack of a better term, a toolbox of emotional reactions that we use on a day-to-day basis that we have now identified can at least be separated from where they come from. Kind of like how to say, if you can identify a piece of past history, an experience you had long ago that invoked the emotional response that you have to something, then perhaps knowing the root cause, you can begin to either create a new current experience and assign that emotional reaction to it, or you can at least identify the problem, if it is a problem, and begin to change the way you look at a current situation that reminds you of a past one. And once you have this quote-unquote toolbox, you can start changing how you look at life and how things affect you in it, which in and of itself would be a ridiculously powerful tool to have.
Trying to engineer your perceptions of reality.
We are doing it anyway. You're just doing it subconsciously. So, and that's kind of the point of this whole topic, is if we can identify and accept that we are already constructing, again, this will go into ego, right, which we talk about all the time. You are in fact constructing your perception of your existence, i.e. your emotional responses to everything around you, then why can't you manipulate it?
Well, I do agree with that, and one of the reasons I agree with that is because growing up with my dad's, a lot of people consider him a very callous, kind of mean individual. I consider him,
emotionless? Is that
he's
what they-
emotionless,
yeah, okay.
and he gets a lot of flack, has always gotten flack from being very unemotional. And to me, and conversations I've had with him, I feel like he has made one of those jumps that we're talking
Or those
about now
connections.
with his connections and emotional
I get told I'm
attachments.
cold
to things.
sometimes.
I
for the
do
same
too.
reason.
I have a lot of people say, well, that's a really cold way of looking at it. It's a really negative way of looking at it. I'm like, negative and realistic are very different things.
Oh, yeah.
Being realistic is the fact that you can identify those. And it's weird because I've met very few people who, like my dad who seem to have the ability to remove emotions from a lot of situations and then make a better decision about it. And I've noticed in my own personal life when I've been in relationships especially
Yeah.
where you're extremely emotionally tied to something, there, for me, and I think I get this from my dad, there's a point where no matter how much I love something or somebody or whatever, there gets a point where the door just shuts. And I don't know how to explain it, but I have no more emotional ties to it, and I don't even blink an eye to just cut whatever it is completely out of my life. And I've seen my dad do that over and over and over, and he gets blamed a lot of times for being a very emotionless human being. And I think that's kind of a really crappy way to think about it, from being realistic and being able to control that. But going back to your conversation, having that control, being able to look at a situation and remove the emotional tie to it, that you're automatically, subconsciously going to, it's going to happen no matter what it is, just like we've been talking about these different triggers. If you can control them, your ability to make rational decisions goes up by 500%.
Absolutely. Let me. Go ahead.
I don't think it's necessarily about controlling the emotion, but you get an emotional response and the ability to be able to recognize that as maybe not being necessary to reach a productive goal, and adapt to your behavior accordingly. Like for the example of getting cut off in traffic, getting upset is not going to change anything.
Absolutely.
But if you ride with that emotion and you respond aggressively to the person that cut you off, you're going to get into a traffic dispute and someone could die. But if you recognize that you're upset and it doesn't really matter and you give them an extra 100 feet, they're going to be somebody else's problem in 5 minutes.
Yeah, and then I also think that being rational enough to look at the overall situation, and I say this all the time to friends who have road rage, and I have some road rage too, but I'm way better about it than I used to be. And here's what I would say. Okay, so this lady cut you off. She might be somebody's grandma who's nervous and has to go to the hospital to see her grandkid, and she hasn't driven in 5 years, and she's scared. You have no idea what the other person is thinking or doing. Mm-hmm. So for you to irrationally make a decision based on your emotions is a really bad way about going about your existence and your coexistence with other human beings. Years ago, I ran a machine shop. I was a manager, and I had to hire and fire people. That was a tough job for me because the emotions got into it. You get to know these people, you work with them, maybe you like them, but I had this kid that was a good kid. He worked real hard. He wanted to do the job. We were just out of work. So last one hired, first one fired. It was my job to go say, dude.
That's a terrible saying.
It is, but when a small business slows down,
Makes sense. It just sucks.
You have to do that. And I was like, I tried to be nice to him, and he got, because I was trying to be nice, and it wasn't just like, dude, here's how it is. Sorry, here's how it goes. Because I was being nice to him, it turned into this huge ordeal. He tried to go over my head, go to the owners, all this crazy. It turned into this huge thing. And my own boss, my owner, was like, why didn't you just tell the kid he was fired? And I was like, well, I did. He goes, no, you tried to be his buddy. This is a job. This is a business. We had no work for him. Just cut to the chase. And I was like, well, that seems very, heartless. And he was like, it's business. These are decisions that have to be made. And I thought about that, and I felt bad about it. But the next couple times that I had to do that, because I had to fire multiple people, I was like, here's the deal. Here's what's going on, blah, blah, blah. That's it. Sorry. And I just walked away. No more conversation.
It's like breaking up with somebody.
It is. If you're going to sit there and explain why you got to break up with somebody for 6.5 hours, you're going to convince yourself out of it.
Right. No, you just got to, you make the decision
and you go with it. And that goes back to, like, some people think as being very cold-hearted, but you're removing your emotion from it. That's a hard decision. I think when people make harsh decisions in life, that's when it's really hard to pull the emotion out of something like that.
Not only are you removing the emotion, you're also changing your emotional reaction to a similar experience that based on a previous experience.
True.
Right? The first time you fired, you felt bad. After that, you're like, wait a minute, no, I have to Now that's a kind of a short-term one. But what if it had been 5 years or 10 years since the next time you had to fire somebody, right? You actually reconstructed your initial emotional reaction to a past situation, to a memory, and reapplied a new emotion to it. One that said, I'm not going to coddle this person. I'm going to let them go immediately, without the whole being your friend thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if you're able to, when you're faced with a tough decision, have to remove the emotion from it in order to get good results. If you let your
I agree,
emotions
but that's
take-
tough to do. Say you're in a relationship and you had a good relationship and things are going wrong and you both realize that this isn't working, and you have to say, just like any relationship, somebody has to speak up and go, this isn't working. But a lot of times the person who does that kind of gets pushed into the mean, heartless individual because they're willing to stand up and draw a line in the sand and go, this has to stop. This is done. Instead of going and coddling somebody and trying to work it out and do all these other things because you're thinking about all the good times or this, and it's again all those emotions come rushing in, and it alters your decision. That's why I always go back every time something like that comes up in my life. I always, for lack of a better terms, what would my dad do right now? And I'm like, sometimes you just got to be a little bit callous in life and go, this is the line. We're done.
Yeah, and that was my point. If you remove your emotional response from it and make a conscious decision on the facts, right, it sounds like you're being cold-hearted, but if you think with your emotions, like you said before, you're going to talk yourself out of it or talk yourself into a bad decision.
Right.
Whereas your dad was able to control his emotions, and people, especially in our culture today, we're very sensitive to other people's feelings. You can't do business like that. You have to hurt feelings eventually,
Not every day is roses.
Yeah, so I don't think your dad's a cold-hearted person. It's just people are too fucking soft to see it for him being an effective communicator.
Yeah. Well, and he's also 82. He grew up in an era where if you weren't doing it, there's a lot less sugar-coating things going on.
The no bullshit era.
Yeah, no bullshit era.
But that was my point. He didn't sugarcoat stuff, so you knew what he meant, and he meant what he said.
Absolutely.
Let me go back and just make one comment off what you guys are saying. I'll expand on the statement both of you made. Not just certain situations, but removing emotion from every situation in your life to make a decision is a benefit.
I totally agree.
There is no situation that you will not think about clearer when you remove emotions.
I can't think of one.
Emotions fuel the...
Oh, it feels good. Doesn't mean it's
fuel.
Oh, fuel, sorry.
they fuel the impulse to make a decision.
They affect
So
your decision-making ability.
It
they-
fuels your impulse.
Right.
And I've not made one good impulsive decision in my life. Lots of bad impulsive decisions.
That's my point.
that's fair.
There is no such thing as emotions helping a situation. They just don't. You made
I disagree with that blanket statement.
a choice that you have to make, a decision that you have to come to. An
Hey,
analysis
somebody's
of
throwing a punch at
situation.
me. My
That's not
emotional-
emotion-based. There
it
is addition. No,
there is
there's an addition of emotion to it. But now you're going back again to the survival, fight, or flight concept.
which is a part of an emotional response,
It has
and it actively preserves my well-being.
You're going too far. Before you get to that point, before you begin to worry about preserving your well-being, that you have an emotional response to it and you have a survival response to it. These are two separate parts of the brain
I think you're trying to say that you can make that choice
without emotion.
without emotion.
That's right, and you will make a clearer choice. So we've discussed fighting before. We had our whole we had a whole topic on martial arts. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Studying martial arts helps an individual, or forget martial arts, practicing fighting helps an individual, like practicing anything, remain control and get used to a situation. I am
Helps
not
to build the muscle memory.
okay. Well, that too, but it also helps you keep your head clear.
And I will argue that practicing martial arts and being in a fight are two very, very different
That's why
situations.
I said practicing fighting. That's why I took my statement back. So practicing fighting,
Even in a practice fight, it is a different... being somebody who has practiced martial arts, have been in multiple sparring matches, and I have been in serious fights. There is a difference between the two. And there is an emotional response that is engaged when you are actually going into serious combat. I mean, I'm not talking killing somebody in the bar or anything, but when somebody actually attacks you, there is an emotional trigger there that you
hold on.
have to recognize.
Yeah, let me finish this then.
I've got one here for this. In this example that you just gave about fighting and sparring, where do you think your performance is better, when you're sparring or when you're in an emotional fist fight?
Sparring, probably.
Because you took the emotion out of it and you
However,
made more conscious decisions minus the emotion, whereas when you were attacked, you had that emotion of fear and anger.
However,
and allowed
that put me in a state of mind where I was willing to actually injure somebody.
Because you added the emotion to it?
Yes. I mean, I'm going to, if I'm just sparring with somebody, I'm going to pull a punch. I'm not going to make
Intentionally
full
hurt
contact.
them, right.
When there's that emotional response and there's that direct threat, it changes the situation. And
That's right. It fucks you up because you're not used to it, and that's what I was going at. What you just described has answered my question. They're two separate, confirm my statement, they are completely two separate things. There's a survival instinct and an emotional instinct. Now, you continually go back to the your life is in threat versus sparring when you're just practicing. You're absolutely right. A person can spar every day of their life, and yet when somebody's pointing a gun at them or getting ready to stick them with a knife, that's a whole different story. They're like, holy crap, I'm not used to, I haven't practiced this situation. Now imagine you're a deployed soldier in Vietnam where every single day of your life you are defending your life and there's no shortage of people who want to gut you and tie you to a tree. Guess what? Every day you are practicing fighting for your life. So when you approach a situation in those circumstances that you are fighting for your life, you aren't as emotionally shook up by the experience because you've been in it all day, every day for the last 5 years of your life, however long you've been deployed. So what kicks in is your survival instinct to save you, not the emotional. You are able to remove the emotion by practicing fighting for your life every day. This is why I started off by saying practicing fighting. Now, let me internalize it to my situation. I have never been in a fight. It actually scares me to think of the pain I may have to inflict or get inflicted upon me based on the angered emotions of another person. Also, I hate being out of control of my emotions so much that I would be wanting to hurt somebody. That's a terrible concept. Because I am not used to dealing with the emotional situation of being in a fight, I have two things going on there. I'm going to get shook up because somebody wants to hurt me for probably a stupid, unjustified, illogical reason. And on top of that, if it gets so bad, I will have a survivalistic instinctive nature or set of actions that will protect me from getting stabbed, punched, kicked to the death, or whatever. Those are two separate things. And I don't believe that survivalistic reactions are emotionally based. I believe the two feed in together, but I do not believe they are one and the same thing.
And if you remove the emotion, you can think clearer.
Absolutely.
And your performance gets
And that is exactly what all your years of practicing fighting and sparring have done for you. Because when you get into the fight situation, you might be shook up that it might be unnerving emotionally because, whoa, I've never actually had somebody try to stab me. Let's say that was your case. However, what you will have on the other side, on the survivalistic side, is a confidence that you can defend yourself from an assailant.
and the muscle memory from the learned reaction.
So-
Then now you're talking about physiology as opposed to...
Right. I guess I'm having a hard time.
Removing the emotion?
Yeah, well, corresponding this. I mean, it was the emotional response which put me in the position where I actually had to defend somebody.
Mm-hmm. Hold on. I got a better idea. Let's talk about sex.
Okay.
Because I can apply this to anything all across the board. I just have to think of a good example. The first time you had sex, the emotions were fucking crazy. There was still an instinctual thing there. There is an instinctual need and drive to fuck. You saw it. You went for it. Your body took over to a certain degree and said, I need to do that right there.
And it was a mess.
And it was that's what we're going to play with here. Yes. We're going to play with it too, with the sex. You had an emotional reaction to it that was jumbly, fumbling around, overexcitement, whatever. And you had a instinctual reaction to what to do there. As time went on and you had more sex, eventually the instinctual didn't go away. It's not like one day you look down, your penis was like, dude, you don't even have to worry about sticking me in there anymore. It's cool. It's like, I don't need to impregnate that female or at least pretend like I am. It's cool. The instinctual will never go away. That is our purpose here as animals and beings in this planet and in this plane. What did change is your emotional reaction to it, because now you can fuck with purpose. You
got a game plan.
Yeah, hopefully you're not blowing it in 20 seconds, right? You can spend some time with the person for a bit. I mean, come on, things changed, right? Because you got a grip on practiced emotional reactions. This is no different than being threatened to be stabbed and fighting for your life. Same thing.
Okay. with the threat to your life, I would say the emotional reaction might be a little bit more intense.
No. Drive to reproduce? I don't know, man.
Hey, you know what?
It fills many a sock.
Shit.
Lots of dudes died trying to get laid.
Oh,
That's
lots
true.
of dudes die just jerking, masturbating.
Well, yeah, if you got a rope
Who's
around
that?
your neck and you're
Well,
trying to.
Well, fuck, dude. I mean, it is associated to some degree, right? I mean, it's far fetched, but okay.
The blue knuckle shuffle.
Oh, that's yeah. Okay, so let's press on here because we still got a lot to cover. Okay, go ahead.
There's an adrenaline dump that goes along with that.
Absolutely, and that does affect emotion.
It does,
but adrenaline is not an emotion. That's like saying a serotonin dump is love. It's part of it,
Well,
but it is not the whole emotion.
really all.
I understand. I'm trying to avoid the chemical representations of emotions because
Okay.
I'm trying to keep this under something we can control. We can't necessarily. Well, actually, I guess you could control. I'm not getting into
By,
the biology.
by schooling
of it.
your emotions, you are regulating the chemical dumps in your brain.
Yes, that's exactly what you're doing. So that is definitely related. But I'm not getting into the biology behind that kind of stuff because it's deep enough and heavy enough to learn to deal with this as it is. And then really you can't, excuse me, for lack of a better term, you can't really control the physical dump. It's not like you're going in there and putting a little dropper vial in this portion of the brain. You're like, dip, oh, I feel good now, right? You have to control it through
Your response.
and your experience, changing your experiences, and your response, exactly. So going back to what I was talking about, altering the use of your emotions once you've started to build this toolbox up. Now, obviously, some emotions are going to be easier to alter than others. One of the first one, when I started, experimenting with this kind of mentality, one of the actually, hold on here. So one of the examples that I was working with there, experimenting with, is I drive to work a lot. My commute is a little over an hour one way every day, back and forth, right? And if it's real bad, it can be up to an hour and 15, hour and a half, whatever. So, I'm putting a good 25,000 miles a year on my cars. Been doing this for about a decade now. I'm actually fairly, zen when it comes to driving, but traffic stresses people out. I mean, it'll stress me out if I have to sit in it long enough, and if we're in the stop and go, we're not going anywhere. However, what that is an emotional reaction to a given situation. What I started realizing is, and it started getting kind of bad, actually. It started getting to the point where I was like grinding my teeth while I was driving and just like what in the hell is this? This is ridiculous. When that started, I started thinking, okay, this is going too far. I need to relax. I didn't always used to get this stressed sitting in traffic. So something changed. Maybe it wasn't. It may not have been like a major event that happened. And all of a sudden, I can identify. I almost got in an accident, or I did get in an accident. And ever since then, I've been super stressed when I get driving. No, nothing like that happened. But nevertheless, over time, something had changed because based on my experiences that I had been collecting over that amount of time, my emotional reaction to this situation was changing, and unfortunately for me, getting worse because the amount of stress was increasing, and it didn't used to be that bad. So I was sitting there thinking, there was a time when I could be on the road, perhaps not, I wasn't on the road as much at the time, but I could be on the road and not be stressed, even sitting in traffic. It was like that probably for all of us out there, for everyone. For me, I identified that time as, let's say, I was on a road trip. I was, in my early 20s or late teens or whatever. We had a couple of friends in the back. We were driving to the Bay Area. We were driving, wherever you're driving, long road trip. You're going someplace fun. We were on the road for hours. And I don't know how it is where you live, but here in California, there was always traffic. There's always traffic. If there are people around, there's always traffic.
Oh man, I miss Oregon.
So you go out of this area with all these people. Anyway, so I used to do this, drive, with people, have fun. It was a good experience. It was not stressful. It was fun. Same circumstances though. Still in a car, long distance, a lot of traffic. Nothing else is different except maybe now I have no people in the car, but whatever. There were times when I drove out there and did that stuff on my own.
But where are you going, and what is your mindset? Are you in a press for time, or is it your destination is definitely playing on that perception?
That's right. But you're absolutely right. And those are the experiences that made me associate then the emotional response of being happy because I'm doing something cool, right? However, that's kind of like stretching it out a little bit further. the immediate fact that I'm trying to focus on is that you are in the car, you are stuck in traffic, and you are driving a long distance. And back in the day, there was a time when that did not stress you out. And even at that time, because you weren't doing it every day, you weren't always doing it all the time, it was not such a learned response. It didn't stress you out at all, ever. It was not a thing to be stressed out when you were on the road. Like, you hadn't even invented that in your mind yet to make it a problem every day of your life. So what I started thinking was, okay, there was a time I used to love being in my car. I used to love it. I used to love to drive. You know, when you were 16 and you first got your license, or
it's that independence and freedom of being able to do what you want, having that control.
And the first time you have it in the U.S., you know, because you're typically living at home, and you get to do and go wherever the fuck you want.
Right?
Yeah. All of those reasons made it a pleasant experience and invoked an emotional response that was not stress. It was happy or free or confident or whatever. Everything but stress. So I started thinking, if I can pull these emotions and remember them when I get in the car, I don't know, put on the good music that you used to listen to back in the day. Maybe commute with somebody else. Find a way to, if you can, even just a fraction of those past experiences, include them in your life now, if that's what it takes, a physical thing, or if you can manipulate your mentality enough, think about those positive things that when you used to like driving, and do that all the time, every day, whatever, for however long it takes. It makes it, and effectually try to re-alter your emotional response to an experience by going through the process of re-experiencing it as you're doing it every day. So you're driving every day no matter what. Get in the car, you think about when it was good, and you do that repeatedly. That's how you formed the emotion in the first place. It was good when it was good. It was good because you had no past negative response to it. Now that you're in the car and every day and you're driving, you are rebuilding this experience and from it forming a new negative response every day, reinforcing it. And that's why it's getting worse and worse and worse, because you're playing off of a previously worse experience or worse emotional response to that experience from day by day by day. You can reverse this the same way by remembering how when it was good. And every day it gets a little easier and a little less of a negative effect on you.
Just put on our podcast and while you're driving. So
there you go.
This is some very, I don't know, for lack of a better term, this is some very strong meditational, power to be able to look inside yourself and the situation and really like reflect on it and have that kind of control. That's asking a lot.
It is.
Of people. And yourself.
I have a thought along that path. You're absolutely right. It is not a simple thing to do. It's not, but I do believe that a majority of people can do it. And this thought is that until you are told you can do something, sometimes it's like this for people. You don't think that you can do it.
You can do it.
That's right. You can do it. Right? So putting it out there that it is possible to do this opens people's minds to think how do I do this? If it is possible, now I know it's something that can be done, I can try to do it. It's like meditation. Meditation is very much.
Well, I was kind of reflecting it back to that because
this is not meditation, so I'm not telling you to be meditating while you're driving.
But I mean, same concept. You're clearing your mind and removing the emotion from it.
However, at the same time, if you take a moment while you're driving and take some deep breaths,
absolutely,
a 4-count inhale and a 4-count exhale repeatedly while you're driving, and you will feel the muscle tension relax.
Absolutely. Like forcing the curled smile when you feel terrible.
Absolutely. And you know what? When you're relaxed, you react faster to issues arising in combat rather than
you're reacting with a clear mind.
Exactly.
Because you're not you're not burdened by your emotion.
In fact, take those deep breaths right after that guy cuts you off.
It helps.
Goose fraba. Yes. Absolutely. So the point behind this is that's just an example. Driving is just an example. You can do the same concept to everything in your life. It applies across the board. Going back to our sex example, because it's funny. If you had a terrible first partner or first experience, some people carry that with them a long time. And it, for lack of a better phrase, ruins sex for them. They can't forget it. This is something that is applicable to a situation like that. It's applicable to anything that you experience, because everything that we experience, we assign emotional reaction. We have emotional reaction to. not well, okay, I'm sorry, maybe not everything. As a matter of fact, Glenn and I were having a conversation before we started this recording here, where I was talking about, I grabbed the cord for the microphone and just waved it in front of him. I was like, that doesn't invoke an emotional response to you. I mean, why would it? It's nothing. It's literally nothing. If I picked up a pencil and dropped it on the table while you were talking to Thomas over there, why would you have an emotional response to that? Unless somebody had picked up a pen and dropped it on your foot a long time ago and it hurt you or something, unless something happened, because you have no past experience for that.
Unless I would identify the behavior as an irritant.
That's right. You have never formed an experience, an emotional reaction to that experience before in your life, and it's not a extremely jarring experience, and it's not threatening your life, and it's not kicking in survival or any other reason to invoke an emotional response, so it is nothing to you. If that can be nothing to you, many other things can be nothing to you as well. You can disassociate whatever your past triggers have been for that emotion. And the reason... Oh, you were going to say something?
Well, what I was going to say about that is, yeah, I agree with that 100%. But, most people, when you talk about these triggers of past events or something like that, a lot of people linger and hold on to the worst things possible, and they don't really have a way of moving past it. And I think going back to that whole thought about the Zen moment of like being able to put yourself in a situation, it's like being in your cars, you're getting buried in an avalanche or something's happened. The worst thing you can possibly do is freak out, or you're drowning. The worst thing you can possibly do is panic.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of a thesis goes back into being able to control your emotions, being able to control your situation. That's a really heavy thing to ask of an average person. I mean, I have really good friends who, like, the moment something happens, they'll trigger it into some stupid, ridiculous thing that happened 15, 20 years ago that has no bearing on their life whatsoever, but for some reason they can't get past that. I think the study of being able to, meditation and really being able to look into yourself to try to get past these, this is a tall order. I mean, and you were talking about you can do it in any facet. I agree. My facet, when I decided that I wanted to have more emotional control over my life, did go back into the driving, because I drive constantly, and I drove in LA all the time. I drive, in Northern California all the time. I've driven on the East Coast all the time. But for me, I started looking at little things that I could add to my reflection of the situation to help remove the stigmatism that I had on it that gave me the emotional response. And just like I used that example earlier about somebody cutting you off in traffic, maybe that's an old lady who hasn't driven in 7 years and she's scared to death. So the best thing you could do would be to give that person a little bit of space, or maybe be a little more friendly to the option that maybe not everybody is on the same page, and that's not a bad thing.
That is not a bad way to open the door of considering the emotion, the situations of others, to help yourself, to help remove yourself from a situation.
Not make it so personal.
True. Okay, so but going back to what you were saying as far regarding the tall order thing, it appears as a daunting task because what we are applying it to are major emotional things. They are not small stuff. Sex, fighting for your life, traffic that, a constant stressor of traffic. These are not necessarily small things. Like any skill in life, you have to start small. You didn't start welding massive projects from day one. You probably started with some angle iron and 2 inches of angle
something
iron.
Simple.
Yeah, something simple. That's exactly the point here. Like anything else, it must be practiced, and you must start with baby steps, just like everything else.
Well, that's why I keep bringing up the example of the driving thing, because
that's not an easy one to do either.
That's
though.
not an easy one. I think that's one that almost everybody can sort of relate to. Even if you're a pretty balanced person, almost everybody gets in a car at one point and screams at the person next.
That's why I picked it. You have to start by identifying small things. First of all, you have to start by understanding and accepting that this is something that exists, that it is actually capable, it is actually a capability that a person can possess to alter their emotions on a certain reaction, or their emotional reactions to a certain experience or event that's happening. Until you say that, you don't even have the idea in your head that you can do this. Once you have the idea in your head that you can start thinking about little things that you may want to alter. It might be this person's voice annoys you. Not somebody who's been yelling at you, who's said horrible things to you. That person's voice, that's a further step down the line. But let's say you're at work, and if you ever watched Office Space, just a moment, right? You have to hear that every day, day in and day out, or maybe you only hear it 1 hour a week. I don't know. But that's a small thing. That person's voice is just a minor annoyance in your life. She's not cussing you out. She's not telling you terrible things. She's just a minor annoyance.
And she's not doing it on purpose.
No, and that's a little thing that you can start with that invokes an emotional reaction, and you can begin separating your emotions to that experience. find a positive way to think of her voice. One of the ways I do that in that circumstance, because I have experienced that same thing from Office Space, I talk to the person, and I actually made friends with the person. Now their voice doesn't annoy me anymore because I have a positive experience with that individual. They're my friend now. I don't know if I'll call my friend, but a coworker that I don't mind talking to.
You've altered your emotional response to it,
Just
by acknowledging it and making...
and created a new emotional response.
Exactly.
Now I think of, I just heard what... I'm going to say her name is Betty. Betty just told me last week that her daughter was starting high school, and I wanted to hear what her first day was. All of a sudden, I have a completely different emotional reaction to than what I did before based on that same stimulus. I still have to listen to her say, just a moment, but it doesn't matter.
So you had to make a conscious decision to adjust your perception.
And being that you have told somebody, you have the ability to make a conscious alteration to your perception of the world around you, is the first step to filling that tall order.
And then you have to exercise it regularly.
Absolutely. Just like you got to fucking breathe and interact with people on a regular, the reason the four of us can sit and talk every week is because we practiced the hell out of it, long before we even got to recording ourselves.
We're bullshitting for years before we started this.
Yes, professional
And it ain't
bullshitters.
stopping anytime soon.
No. Usually there's more alcohol involved, but whatever. We got lots of buttons here to manipulate, so it's a little more difficult for me. But yes.
Here, take a shot.
Tall order indeed, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. When you were learning to drive, that was a tall order. I learned to drive on a stick. You probably did too, Thomas.
Yep.
That was horrible, dude.
Dude, I love driving stick shifts.
No, I loved it after I learned, but to learn to drive with the stick, that was my first car.
Yeah.
How many times did you stall?
Dude, I was so pissed at my dad because he was the one teaching me or whatever. Oh, it was terrible. I was so frustrated, so stressed. And really what it came down to is this is so off topic. He wasn't telling me specifically what to do with my feet. He just kept telling me, push the clutch in, move the shifter, push the clutch.
How did that make you feel, Ben?
He's getting all riled up already. See that response?
An emotional response based on a past experience. Now, if I wanted
Your
to
dad's
change...
riding your ass, and now you don't drive a stick.
I think
Thanks, Papa Ben. Son of a bitch.
Well done. You are
Wow.
absolutely right. I do
nice
not drive a stick.
connection, Rick.
Actually, traffic got me out of the manual transmission, but yes.
My bad knees got me out of driving stick shifts.
Dude, seriously. Remember that? There was
Fucking hurts.
Remember that VW commercial? It was, it started, I never watched TV, but years ago there was this VW commercial, and they were in a gym, and it was a guy and a girl sitting next to each other, and she's doing this weird workout with her leg where she's stretching her leg and pushing like a tension band, and he's like...
Calf exercises.
Calf exercise, right? He's like, and I think he asked her, "Are you going to get ready for a marathon?" She's like, "No. I just bought a new Jetta or some shit like that with the manual transmission, Wolfsburg edition, whatever the hell, twin turbo Jetta." I'm like, oh, geez, man. Yeah. Anyway.
The random stuff that sticks in your brain.
I know. Stupid, dude. I don't even like VWs.
So the emotional trigger of getting frustrated by stick shifts sparked a memory of a commercial that you saw years ago.
Now,
I think you
got
to get rid of your emotional attachment to that.
That's right.
You should learn to forgive your father.
I think you should call him after we get done recording and apologize.
So really, it just all relates to daddy issues.
Ben has daddy issues. That is exactly where I wanted to go next with this. That's a perfect example. I had an emotional reaction to a stupid commercial, based on something that I remembered. I had never thought of that before just now, that why I felt that way from what I saw. That's the first step. Once you have accepted that you can do this and you've got little steps, you've done it little times.
Admitting your problem is the first step.
The first step to figuring out something bigger, expanding the capability. You have to reverse engineer your life, your experiences. You have to question, when I see something that's about to happen and it makes me feel a certain way, where did that come from? You have to trace back the steps. Think of all the things in a chronological order from now back that have happened to you that may relate to that situation, and that is how you begin figuring out where you need to deconstruct the experience to rewrite a new emotional response to it.
Which translates to a new behavioral response to a situation as it arises.
Which also goes back into making yourself a better person. As we get older,
and that's ultimately what this is for.
Yeah, and as I get older, I try to really shed a lot of things that and you hear people say, "Oh, when I was younger, I would have went off the handle over this situation or that or whatever," and you just do that as you develop. But that's just part of growing up and part of maturing, and hopefully you're able to see those things about yourself and work on those in small details, but a lot of people don't.
No, like I said, I believe that more people have the potential than know that they do, because nobody's ever educated them on the fact that they could do this, or never figured it out on their own. Doesn't necessarily have to be educated on it.
I think it takes a certain degree of self-awareness to even
That's
address
what I was
these
looking
situations.
for the whole time. Self-awareness. I could
Absolutely,
not get that phrase.
Okay, look at the word aware. You become aware of things when you are made aware of things. Some things you'll collect on your own, like that's a white wall and that's a green sweater or whatever. Yeah, I'm aware of that. But some things people have to go up and say, Glenn, this is how you do long division. You are aware of long division now because you were taught it. It's not like it was written on the wall and you saw it and you're like, what is that? Oh, that's long division, dude. No, it was never written anywhere. Maybe
somebody figured it out at some point.
No, well, I mean, where the origin of it is different than how it came to you.
Sure.
So self-awareness can also come about exactly the same way. Somebody needs to, sometimes it can help if somebody makes you aware of yourself or parts of yourself or whatever,
Make you aware that you're being an asshole.
Yeah.
That's the first step.
Exactly.
Right?
Okay. Taking a different spin on this, because what I wanted to establish with this whole thing, and we are going to go way over time, so I apologize for those that were expecting an hour-long episode. This one's going to run a little longer because I have to finish this. We're not making this a two-parter.
You got to finish.
I got to finish, dude. Otherwise, I'll have a
Whether
negative
she's
emotional
asleep or
response.
not, he's got to finish.
Otherwise, I'll have a negative emotional response to this situation should it happen to me again. And right off the bat, that's one of the negatives of not learning to alter this before I even get into the next section here. If you don't learn to control the emotional reactions that you have to certain experiences, and this is how we started this topic, you will preemptively assign emotional reactions to situations that are either unfolding, haven't even unfolded, or might not unfold, depending on what your circumstances are. And that is not good. That is not fair. That is the same thing as being racistly prejudiced. You are being prejudiced to a situation that you don't know anything about. It may not unfold that way. The man might not hit the dog. And now you have, but if you don't learn to control the preemptive nature of this, you may begin to form the emotion that was involved when you saw another animal get hit, and you may reflect that on that guy or that person who you think might hit the dog but hasn't hit the dog. So now you don't like that guy for no reason at all. Just like the guy who cut you off could be a little granny who's about to piss her pants, needed to get off the freeway real fast, because that's actually one of the ones I use in my head, is that maybe they have to pee really bad. And if they don't get off the freeway, so I just kind of watch where they're going after that. Anyway, for all you know, it's a little granny who's about to piss her pants, and you're over here, based on your past experiences, having an emotional reaction that's pissing you off and annoying you because that person cut you off. You don't know the situation, right? And now you're angry at this little old granny who may be the sweetest woman in the world. You got Betty White over there you're pissed off at. Come on. You're an asshole. How do you feel about yourself now? That's the bad part of allowing yourself to continually preemptively assigning emotions to situations.
Well, to take it a step further, I mean, look at emotional responses with violent outcomes.
Describe.
Somebody that beats their child. They have a predetermined emotional response to a situation. They don't know how to deal with it or can't recognize
Who, the child or the beater?
The beater.
Oh, okay.
The person, the aggressor.
Now, take a step back on that one. What if the beater was beaten when they were young?
Sure, they have a learned response to a situation, but being able to identify an emotion as it is arising and be able to step back from that situation that's anger management.
That's if the emotion is anger. It doesn't have to be. We keep going the negative, and that's why I don't want to stay.
I don't necessarily think that anger is a negative.
It can be positively used, of course. But
perception.
Okay. We keep going to the negative or the fight and flight or whatever. But
it's one of the stronger emotions that we feel.
Absolutely. And what Thomas was saying is that's a tall order. Stopping the child beating person because they were beaten as a child, that's way, way deep, dude. That damage is so far in there that, you'd really have to go through years and years of assistance in learning how to separate emotions and experiences. That's therapy. You're not going to do that on your own. That's too big.
I disagree. I think that's a huge level of self-awareness that needs to be taken by the abuser to reckon they were likely beaten as a child. There's no way that they are not aware that is unacceptable behavior. And if they can gain the self-awareness and begin the exercises to achieve a calm head and address the child like a human.
Okay, maybe they could
They
do it
can get
themselves.
Yeah,
through
but
I
if
don't want to say
yeah,
it's
but
impossible.
easy.
Yeah, but you also can consider maybe that person that's the abuser is an alcoholic. They don't have time to,
All right, see,
to
there's
reflect or do
okay,
anything.
there-
There's too many variables.
It's an infinite
into
number
that.
of variables when you begin picking apart the equation of the human mind. You start adding. That's why you have to keep, like when we study physics, you take ideal conditions. You can't look at everything. You
Take
know?
out the friction.
You got to take out that wind resistance. When you're calculating Newtonian physics for the ball that's flying through the. Anyway, that doesn't matter. You have to take ideal conditions for when you look at this kind of stuff because, dude, there's just way too many variables. And for sake of just introducing the topic, that's why I'm trying to simplify things down as much as possible, yet still keep it at an applicable level that all of us can relate to. That's kind of what I was going off of there. Okay. Something else, or can we continue? Okay.
Golden pony way.
Yeah. You picking up what I'm putting down, dude?
I can dig it.
Yeah, right. Now that we've established that emotions are not only fickle because we can crack a smile when we feel terrible and feel a little better, but they are also manipulatable by altering the associations that we have in our minds based on experiences with new experiences that make us feel better, and vice versa. The natural progression of that for me was, okay, if this is the case and these are the givens, what are emotions really worth at all? If it's something that I could change, take a step back. If it's something that I can first manipulate, going from black to white, as easy as super depressed, cracking a smile, now I feel better, keep smiling, I feel even better, and then the next step, being able to alter the way I feel preemptively emotionally to a certain situation or a certain event, what the hell is actually the value of emotions?
I would say it's your quality of your existence. If you can engineer your emotions to enjoy your situations, then you're going to have an improved time on this rock.
Well, I think it's also empathy too. Empathy for your fellow man. That's an emotion.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So your ability to cohabitate, get
Right.
along with others,
So
I think being able to control your emotions doesn't take the value out of it or manipulate it.
what I
right?
was just gonna go.
you can control your financial situation to a certain degree, and if you can manipulate it to improve it, it doesn't devalue it any. It betters your existence on this rock, like Glenn.
not all emotions are worth getting rid of. That's for damn sure. That's not at all what I'm saying. But having the ability to manipulate your emotional responses can do things like, have you ever wanted to be happy? This one has perplexed me, and this is one of the reasons it caused me to do this in the first place. I find it, over the course of my life, I have found it extremely frustrating to answer, am I happy? What the fuck does that mean? Am I happy?
It's a state of mind.
Bingo.
It's
The word decision. Why is it a decision? Because it is manipulatable. Because those that are happy all the time with their life and their circumstances have actively made a decision to associate all experiences with positive, happy emotions and go through life like an idiot, happy all the time. Hey,
Ignorance is bliss.
ignorance is bliss. Yes, that's a whole nother topic right there. But so you can manipulate yourself to be happy all the time. All of us, everyone out there listening, knows somebody who's super happy all the time. You probably also know somebody who's super depressed all the time, and you probably know somebody who's super like stiff-necked and angry all the time. They did that stuff to themselves, unconsciously or consciously, doesn't matter. They did it to themselves. There are people who were beaten as children and horrible living situations, grew up in poverty, and are happier than you will probably ever be. All over the world. It is all based on their interpretation of their surroundings, interpretation of their experiences, and the emotional reactions that they assign to it for whatever reason they chose to assign to it emotionally or consciously or unconsciously.
It's all a matter of perception.
That's it.
Our reality is something that we project out from our brains.
From within.
It really is.
Yeah.
So what we are seeing is a projection from within. How we decide, and it is a decision, how we decide to construct that perception will affect how we react to it.
And you can also choose to accept or your situation in a positive way, not just am I happy, but is this a good place to be? And if it's not, just like controlling your emotions, make a conscious effort to change it to an acceptable place.
Well, I
be
think.
happy there.
Well, I think when we're talking about the happy thing too, we also got to remember that we live in a culture where happiness is associated with lots of other things, like material possessions.
And that's not where I wanted this to go.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to take it that way, but I think that's a consideration.
They use this against us.
Absolutely.
They use the fact that you cannot control your emotions against you. If you buy this item, you will feel happiness. That's a
until the new one comes out.
Until the new one comes out. Upgrade, go and get his money. That is how they use this against us. They use the ignorance that people cannot, they think that they cannot manipulate their emotions. Therefore, they know they can manipulate your emotions.
Sure, but with those, I mean, a lot of things, look at your iPhones. They're supplying something that actually causes a chemical dump in our brains.
Okay, but that's just the iPhone. So what, I mean, that's just a screen
or
of
your
technology.
coffee, or
True.
Your new
sugar.
car.
How about that fancy Recaro car seat for your kid?
you're still the act. Maybe you have you've triggered purchasing something with a serotonin dump.
Absolutely, because it makes you happy.
So you've developed an emotional reaction to.
After enough time, they've got you programmed so that your previous experiences are, when I got that thing that they told me would make me happy, I am now happy.
There are plenty of people there that are on the opposite end of that spectrum.
Absolutely,
that
absolutely.
are totally content, don't care about keeping up with the Joneses. They're happy with what they have, and they're excited when they get an upgrade. Or maybe they choose not to have it. They don't need a new car.
It doesn't
every
matter the
8
level of
years.
consumption either, because if they buy it once and they're happy, or they buy it twice, or they buy it every week, every day of their every week of their life,
Or if they never buy it.
yeah, it doesn't matter, because what the goal is there to associate that if you do what we say will make you happy, you will be happy, and that creates this is kind of off topic, but that creates the invoked emotional response based on the experience. You saw the picture of the couple on the TV, and they say, if you go on Carnival Cruise Lines, you will look like these two. And you go on there and you're like, dude, this place is kind of dirty, and the food tastes like the worst fucking buffet I've ever had. And why did we do this?
But you can take that bad experience and make it fun.
Absolutely, you could, but nevertheless, my point is they use it as a sales tactic. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're absolutely right. It can go a million different ways, and again, we start introducing an infinite number of variables.
And that example is you choosing to be happy and accepting the situation for what it is and making it an adventure instead of a romantic cruise.
Yeah.
And hopefully you can come home and laugh and tell your friends about it. Be like, don't ever fucking go there. These idiots almost crashed the ship.
Yeah.
Or whatever, and it doesn't have to be anything materialistic. It's like how you want to live your life as an adult. Do you want to own a home? Do you want to have children? Do you want to keep animals? All these things bring some people happiness, and all these things bring other people
Misery.
Exactly. Misery. It's like there's a rock tied around their neck because they have children or because they own a home that always needs repair or whatever.
One of my strongest points that I want everyone to take away from this is asking themselves that question: what are emotions really worth? And part of the point behind the discussion, however deep it was for you to go through or difficult to go through, was to belittle and discredit emotions. It's a funny thing to say that you should not put stock or value, as much stock or value, on your emotions, but you really should not put so much stock or value on your emotions, because without them, you will make clearer decisions and better judgment. Have we not confirmed that thus far?
Yeah, but I think
agree.
I think in some degree that becomes a personal choice. I mean,
It's always
it's
a
an
personal
opinion.
choice.
It's more of an opinion. That's your opinion. I mean, there might be somebody listening to go, if I wasn't thinking about the emotional part of this, I would have never been able to do A, B, and C. I mean, I agree with you on a vast percentage, but I do think this is again, like we've been saying, and the argument is it's a personal choice too. Some people love the fact that their emotions help them make decisions or do things. I mean, parents, mothers, people who are nurturing, a lot of that is based on emotional.
Yeah, it's personal value. However much value you want to place on your emotions is how much they're worth. It's a very individual choice. I can't say that you can no. For you, maybe they aren't very important, but for me, they are.
Yeah, and that's I think what Glenn is definitely wrapping up what I'm trying to say is because I go back to my dad and everybody thought he was a cold-hearted just jerk, And I'm like, well, he made a lot of good decisions, but being a parent was not a good one. He was a terrible parent. He was a terrible person to learn from, and because he was such a emotionless being. And then you think of like a mother and go back to the nurturing thing, and a lot of the ways that they handle or deal with, raising children is very an emotional guided thing. And I think going back exactly like Glenn said, I agree that there's a lot that can be gained from being able to control your emotion. And I think there's a ton that can be gained from getting them out of the picture completely. But as humans, I think emotions play a very strong identification of who we are as individuals.
Yeah, I agree that removing the emotions from decision making is a positive thing, but I think not valuing emotions at all. I value the emotions because that improves the quality of my life, right? If I didn't hate the sound of that woman's voice complaining 3 cubicles away from me, I wouldn't appreciate the quietness on my hike on my weekend, right? And that improved
Maybe you wouldn't
that
need the quietness
experience
of the hike on your weekend.
It's not the only thing that I like about that experience, but it improves
gotcha.
part of that experience for me.
I kind of played devil's advocate, by the
Yeah.
way, with that statement to see what would come out.
And
yeah,
we let our emotions take the better of us,
Absolutely.
and we all fucking bit.
absolutely. That's the point.
Yeah.
You're not going to remove emotions completely from humans. We are not that. We are emotional beings. That's what makes the best and the worst of us.
We could cut it
Upload
out.
a copy
Yeah.
of your mind to the Matrix where you're not going to have any chemical dumps.
That's it.
But
That's
I
it.
do agree with the assumption that if we can pull those emotions out of most of our life and have more actual mental control over,
And you can improve the quality of your life.
Absolutely.
If you can do that as well.
Yeah, but I think that with a lot of things there has to be a balance too.
There's always a balance to be sought. That's right. That's a whole nother topic, though. Hopefully you guys found that a little interesting, and we didn't go too far over for you. And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Show notes and other info can be found at our website, greatdistraction.com. The Great Distraction is listed in iTunes, and we greatly appreciate it when our listeners take the time to look us up and leave us a 5-star rating and review. That helps our show grow and motivates us to continue producing content. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can do so using the email address, greatdistractionpodcast@gmail.com, or via our website. We're always interested in hearing any thoughts, comments, or questions from our listeners. Keeping up on the latest from us can be done in several different ways. You can add us to your favorite RSS feed tracker. The link is available on our website or in iTunes. Or you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Great Distraction, one word, no space. As always, thank you for listening, and thank you for all the support.